Okay, let me get started then. I'm sharing my screen. Hopefully, folks are able to see it. Are you guys able to see my screen? Like,
Yes.
okay. Okay, cool. Thanks. Let's get started, folks. Thank you for joining on the call. Who am I? We'll be talking about Claude Code and GitHub Copilot tips. And where I'm coming from is I have been working on multimodal AI about 15 plus years into cutting edge AI, IoT, innovation, design areas. In terms of the background, I also have a black belt in martial arts. The only thing, the reason I'm bringing this up is in this evolutionary, everyday changing generative AI. If any one of you is working on it, things like martial arts and other things are super helpful in terms of let me admit everyone so in terms of helping you navigate through this AI work stream. So in terms of let me close the window. What I love talking about, if we have time remaining at the end, I would love to talk about anything in your area about AI trends you're interested in, taste or AI trust building. But let's get started. Before we go into the tips, my talk is talking about today Wizards of Oz. So hopefully you guys have seen Wizards of Oz. Can you guys give a like, thumbs up, thumbs down? Have you watched the movie Wizard of Oz? If not, that's completely fine. The reason where I'm going is I want to give all the tips and tricks of if you have not watched, maybe a good weekend movie to watch is be like Dorothy in order to navigate all the Claude Code GitHub journey in your AI things. And to be specific, what I'll be covering today, tips and tricks, it is into three categories from Dorothy. One is how do we embrace AI tools to think us better? How the second, which is the taking cue from the other movie also. And the second it's a category of tips we'll be talking about is how do you use AI tools for courage building. Courage by here I mean multimodal, different things which you might have not tried because you would say, hey, this is not my discipline. But the way I've embraced it, it has helped me become more courageous in trying out workflows that I've not tried. So, second tips of buckets will be around courage building, and third would be around empathy. Empathy is about it's okay if you don't know. I've seen a lot of people who are ramping up on GitHub Copilot and Claude Code saying, hey, I didn't know what it did. I just said yes, 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 accepted. So, those are the three buckets we'll be walking through in terms of the tips and tricks. First bucket of thinking. If you guys have not used commands, be it like GitHub Copilot or Claude Code, there are memory related commands. At the top two commands, which has helped me become more, I would say, not pro, but at least better and efficient, is called Chronicle and Insight. So, Insight is a Claude Code command, and Chronicle is a GitHub Copilot command. What it does is you can just run like slash Chronicle tips. It understand your personalized patterns of how you're using, even if you're struggling, and then it will give a HTML report based on your needs of saying, hey, we I saw you were struggling with this tool, maybe try this way of hacking, but I've used it actively, maybe every few days I run it and create for my personal things. It helps me become better and efficient, but that's one tip I would say, hash one, that has helped me a lot. And to give an example, this is in a screenshot of a Claude Insight and tips and tricks thing I generated. Literally, that only told me what are the 10 best practices. I'm zooming in to show you. We'll go through in detail, but some of the things that I use, it told me, hey, these are the tips and tricks that you can share with other people also. So slash insight helps you. It also tells you where you're struggling. So if you see another screenshot I've added is like friction analysis it does of where my issues are or what kind of session am I a multitasker, is it impacting in productivity or not. So lot of goodness around just understanding your pattern. Don't just copy and repeat your other people's pattern. The second tip on thinking is people come out and reach like, hey, should I be using Claude Code or GitHub Copilot? There is not either or answer at this point. I would say because each of them has their own strengths, but how I use in my workflow, I especially with Claude and GitHub, they've started releasing where you can have multimodal outputs. In my day-to-day journey, I've noticed if I have to take, for example, a product decision, sometimes I'll do the analysis with Claude Code and then give the same analysis to GitHub Copilot. It's like, hey, evaluate and find it out. Or even if you're using just one platform, say GitHub Copilot, because GitHub Copilot has multiple models. You could have Opus also, Opus 4.7 that got released yesterday, or GPT models. You can have something, there are commands nowadays or publicly available that you can do a consortium on an expert panel creation. You don't have to start creating it, those are available, but usually that's one thing I do. Another thing, if you are struggling to figure out, should I start focusing more on A versus B platform, create skills. Skills are .md files, but what that is helping you is those are cross platform. So if you create majority of the time a skill in Copilot, you might say, wow, it might not be usable, but I've seen and I've been working on where I give the same, for example, taste.md file for my personalization, the same file to GitHub, and it automatically adapts. So you don't have to worry about resharing and starting from scratch. I've been using it in terms of back and forth on those answers. And the reason I'm mentioning is don't always believe the first answer AI gives you is the right answer, because it doesn't know all the context, no matter how much memory management it is doing. And that comes to the third, it's a continuation of the second tip only on thinking. There are new features in last 2 weeks launch which helps you optimize your contextual memory. So if you're into AI agentic world, you might be hearing more about how do you maintain the long-term memory context awareness, personalization in long term. So there are the trends currently are in both GitHub and Copilot. There are commands. This is an actual command. You can do slash dream. Even GitHub has relevant one. What does that does is usually in memory layer or context layer, every platform does it. It starts developing patterns, but after a point the patterns become so overwrought that it might not be useful for you, because it might not be a separation of your day-to-day work. You might be switching between work A and work B, but it might still remember a context A. So what dreaming does, it auto optimize every few days or every week. It would auto run and figure out what things are not making sense for your long-term memory and remove that. So dreaming is a feature of more optimization, but just you have to go slash dream, turn on, but don't have to do the backend. It will be helpful for you as you personalize the memory. So that's another thinking tip I've done. The third one, there are a lot of fun, even in last 1 week, GitHub Copilot and Claude has been releasing commands called, so three of the top ones I've mentioned here. Power up. So if any of you're starting new, it's like, hey, I don't know what to use, what are the new things. If you'll try power up command after updating your latest Claude code, it will help you through an interactive lesson of what instructions and other places you are doing. So the CLI platform, which is the command terminal, has been evolving to another one. I think 2 days back, Claude has launched. It's called team onboarding. So if you know someone in your team or in your friend circle who is pro in these instructions, just ask them to run slash team onboarding. What this will do is it will create an automatic knowledge management or a documentation based on their pattern that they can share with other people to help onboard. So those are interesting things people don't know, but I've been using it and it's fun. Similarly, so top two are for Claude Code. For GitHub Copilot, Share is very getting popular. I've not seen an equivalent for Claude Code currently, but what slash share does, you can share your session, conversation history. You can define. It could be even it could condense into a GitHub file, create that. You can share a session, you can create HTML, but there's a lot of flexibility. But point there is, you are not alone in this journey, folks. Like there are commands that you can learn and even take you through this learning journey. So in your thinking mode, leverage these tips. I'll pause for 30 seconds. Any questions on the first bucket of thinking? If not, or we can take up questions at the end too. Second bucket of courage. By courage, I've already told of how do you use it. Please don't just limit to what LinkedIn or like basic Google News and Reddit, those are saying. Try new workflows. And that is how I have learned and differentiated in terms of trying out. I started using now Claude Code and GitHub Copilot for creating storyboarding, pixel art animations, icons, and those are like for irrespective of your workflows. If you have to design something, sometimes not always spec is there, but You can obviously go towards the direct prototype and iterative product development, but I've also seen there is still a between thing where people are trying to figure out, can you make interactive visualizations even before you start coding? So I've started seeing, even with my audio workflows like music creation, I would literally take a YouTube video, extract some of the insights and have it there. So that's one example. Another one, last week, if you guys follow generative AI, you might be aware of Andres Karpathy. He showed his workflow and I have adapted it for my creatives to understanding and workflow. This is Obsidian, but I've connected Obsidian to GitHub Copilot and Claude Code. And what that does is it takes all my data but helps create a visual knowledge graph of it. And I've provided the link. I'll share this PDF with you guys after the call if anyone is interested in the links. But otherwise, just search for knowledge graph with Andres Karpathy. But I've actually, this was released last week. It's available on GitHub just publicly. But my way of understanding content and data has evolved with that. So I would say embrace those kinds of new tools where maybe Obsidian was not your day-to-day platform, but it could be interesting how it evolves and creates an animation of how your knowledge is even increasing. So it's like a memory map, but Claude can control those. Another fun one, like all these pixel art animation I was mentioning, but also people like these are all like gradients I found out as I was coding with Claude Code, that some of the functions, especially like I try to create multiple fun backgrounds and other things, you can do Gaussian blur, but create that modern trend and design of, so that's like this kind of designs you can create quickly with those. People might think, no, it's like it's just traditional patterns, but you can quickly evolve. But if I had not used it by myself and just gave it an example, and how I give these examples? I just create a Pinterest board and give a screenshot. So I'll share that also tip. But I have started to find patterns of what interesting nuances, like these is icon grid. I can create so effectively, and that's a shared skill. I use some of the interesting styles. I've started using like the Celestian ones, like grainy background is there. I'll be posting on my Substack tomorrow if anyone is interested of what are the patterns that I've been seeing. But point is, if you're using it and going out of your comfort zone, that will be helpful for you. And if you're new and it's like, hey, this all looks like I don't know how do I start. I've given this as a list of site for inspiration, but few things I want to call out. If you think the normal inspiration site are different from AI inspiration, which is actually true. In last couple of weeks, the latest trend that I've started adopting, especially if you go to sites like motion sites, 21st.dev, or even Google and other companies have started sharing this as like getdesign.md, where you can go into different design companies.md file, find it in terms of the brand, or with the motion site, what you do is like you just copy the prompt and it automatically has all the assets and everything. You don't have to figure out how do you upload the assets. It's just copy paste and create it. So there is a new pattern of inspiration taking also evolving. So I would say, yeah, if not, you don't have time for all the sites, maybe try something like motion dev and see how you can workflow quickly change. Because with just one copy prompt, you can change the entire design system. And how I've been using, I have my taste skills on my GitHub. You can go and use it. But yesterday, if you guys have read the news, Claude Design was launched. Now everyone's like, another tool, how do I ramp up? But the good news is my pattern of inspiration, I was telling, since I had an MD file, I have a design system. I just connected, I'm again zooming this, and it's like, this is the Claude design thing. Go to claude.ai/design, which was launched yesterday. I just gave a link to my GitHub of the taste file, and it automatically created the design system. So obviously you can have sites, but if you don't have it, don't worry about tools. Just try to move across the tools. So that has been helping me in terms of ramping up new tools quickly too. Use multiple, and I'm giving you a lot of information, so feel free to follow up or pause me if you guys have any question. Another tip, or tip 5, on multi-agent tools. So you might think I've been using tools like VS Code for a long time, but even there, or Google Anti-Gravity launched some months back, some new patterns are evolving and you need to be conscious or even try out, agnostic of whatever discipline you are at. For example, this week VS Code launched something called Agents app, and all you need is you have to go to the VS Code insider version, install it, and then open. But the pattern there is with multi-mode agents, you can have it parallelly running rather than different terminals. It helps you more seamlessly communicate and have become more productive. So, and that's a new pattern evolving of how multi-agent development looks like. Even if you're not a coder, I would still recommend these tools. For example, Claude Desktop updated itself about 4 days back or 3, 4 days back. The point that this is the screenshot to the left one on Claude Code. Even if you're not an engineer, the left one, if you see, the routines are regular ones that you want to daily run, you can do it. And if you're into multi audio piece kind of thing, you might be using Whisperflow. But another one, open source, I started using a lot is Microsoft Vibe, which what and how I use it, Cloud Code, etc. with multi-agent is I don't need to worry about if I'm using English words or English word. Literally, I'm giving instructions to Claude in multilingual, meaning half of my sentence would be in English, half of it is in some other language. And Claude has been responding to it. So that's another thing. The tools are also evolving, even if you might know what the features. So keep an eye on in terms of the creativity when you bring. There's also, everyone might, if not, you've not heard about browser control or computer use. Those are common trends. But I've sometimes you seen, I try to reverse engineer with Claude and it's like, how do I understand as a layman those computer use if I have to create my own browser agent or computer use? And I have a blog post also, but I found there are libraries, it's beyond tools, libraries like Playwright. Those are super effective in learning and automating your own workflows. So for my workflow, it's like every morning I have to run an evaluation of like more for front end UI testing. It would just, I have a personal script or a MD file. It's like, hey, just go based on Playwright, run the Playwright. It will open a this XYZ app, go on this tab, collect it, get the output, save it in the folder so that when I wake up, things are already there. But if you start thinking about, no, I need to learn XYZ specific browser control, you can do that. But understanding some of the ground principles like Playwright is a common functionality across all of them could be helpful for you. So don't worry if you don't know, just ask. Like I have been learning all these tips with asking. Another one of multi-agent tip I've been using a lot is Fleet. So Fleet is a feature or a functionality in GitHub, but the similar one Claude automatically does. Until 1.5 months back, I would have multiple terminals running multiple agents and trying to multitask, but that was not productive for me. Or recently, I've started to use these commands, which if you see an instruction, if you say this is a screenshot from GitHub Copilot, I gave in this one sentence seven, four, five, or more like more than five tasks. And I don't need to say, hey, create an agent for this, create an Excel for skill for that. It automatically spin up multiple agents for me. So Claude has a similar functionality where you can spin up multiple sub agents. You don't have to use Fleet there, but that helps you in becoming more productive. At least I've been seeing too. When I have multiple terminals, just switching between the terminals wasn't productive. And if you're starting from scratch, this is your first time ever hearing about Cloud Code. One of the first tip I give any of my onboarding new hire or employees every day, please update your tool and run slash. Just type slash in your tool. Every day there is new, maybe gone are the days where after a few days or a week updates will come. I have been running daily like updates for my team, and every morning before I get up I see a new slash command has pop up. So you don't need to embrace all the latest ones, but at least even if you scroll down and see, you might find something that will help you more productive. So the reason I'm mentioning is my productivity, even 2 weeks back to what is today, has evolved just because of every day I just update and type slash and see what things could be useful for me there. So that's the second bucket of courage. Try out new things if you've not tried. Any questions on this one? No? Okay, we'll come on.
Hey,
Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
hey,
Sorry.
Raleigh. I had a question. I just wanted to hear your take on how you think about Claude Cowork versus Claude Code because heard you mention Claude Code a couple of times. So I was wondering if you evaluate if that task that you need to do is Cowork the right place to do it, or do you just default to code?
So it depends of your personalization needs. since I like to navigate between, if you are in, it's like you don't need to worry about, you don't need to see the code, etc. You can have co-work in most of these platforms. Like, hey, I'm giving you a task, fetch this, do automatically. But since I need more freedom in terms of trying out code, SVGs, and other things, I want to use it within VS Code and other platforms. So I prefer Claude Code personally for now. But I'm also seeing co-work is starting to grow where people don't want to see the back end and other pieces. So in that terms, I think it's a personal preference. But co-work is also growing a lot, agnostic of like not just Claude, but even like Microsoft has co-work, which is in the frontier. So I would say, yeah, start with co-work. It will help you with quickly fetching data, getting end to end done. But if you want more personalization, that's where Claude Code. Even people get confused of Claude Code. Should I use it in a terminal? Should I use it on a desktop? It varies. Some people I've seen who want more personalization go into the terminal and CLI even with Claude Code. Otherwise, people are into just like desktop or web browser for even co-work or desktop. So
Yeah, yeah, got it. That makes sense. But one other question is, like the way I think about it sometimes is if I don't want to produce an artifact which is of code type,
hmm.
like I maybe just want to run an agent versus if I want to build a web app where there is going to be code and stuff. Is that like another way to think about it, or like if I'm working from existing repositories, then of course Claude Code would be my intuitive choice. So
Hmm.
anywhere where code is involved, either I'm working from existing code or wanting to build new code, I would default to Claude Code just by intuition. But I don't know if that is the right way to think about
That's
it.
one way, but overall, it's domain and your needs. For example, even if I am not developing a website, I might be for my workflows, I'm creating, say, icons. Technically, I know icons are, if icons are SVG, it's a code, and I want to see how like Claude is thinking. And so in that terms, it's also my domain, as you're mentioning, the code need or not, but there's also curiosity of I want to know
Okay,
what's happening in backend because that has been helping me with reverse engineer a lot. Especially
okay,
with things
got
like
it.
browser control, if I'm working on code, it's like, yeah, it happens, it did all stuff. It's like, no, how did I understand what script did it run? So it's
Hmm,
also curiosity thing also. But your instinct is right. If it's website code, maybe, yeah, you can do with co-work. But if you're curious, even if you're not coding, sometimes curiosity has helped me open new thinking ways. So
makes sense, makes sense. So, yeah, thank you for sharing that. Yep.
thank you. Okay, the third bucket, empathy. So empathy is folks in just of understanding this another world. Might, I'm seeing a trend, maybe in few weeks it become more popular. It's like, how do you create self adaptive or self healing systems, not for even shipping but for your own day to day needs. And one of the things trend currently is about something called, in Claude it's called BTW, which is like, by the way, where we know usually when agentic or some process is running, it could take minutes. And I have seen, based on my insights, not always after 5 minutes or X number of minutes, the output might not be what you need. In that terms, rather than waiting till X number of minutes, if you see the direction of any of these tools going in the wrong way, especially with code, I usually pause. Pause is like just say BTW and I ask a separate question. So it will pause whatever it's doing and try to answer that question. But it could be also as like, hey, it's taking too much time. In normal workflow, maybe until few weeks back, I would have to wait. Even in if you're using like Chat GPT, it's like you have to wait to run the next command. But here you can, by the way, and ask question. It helps in interruption, but also course correcting. So it's a you when people talk about human AI collaboration, this is an interesting example. I would say that similar one, GitHub Copilot doesn't have BTW, but it has something called streaming, where as it's going through the reasoning, you understand and you can then pause in between there. So I would say start even looking at those perspective also. You don't have to always wait in terms of empathy that AI knows always best. Based on my daily workflows, I've seen I've wasted enough time, and that's why I'm sharing that this has helped me around stop. And this is another screenshot from my first tip of slash insights that I found. I'll zoom in. This was screenshot. Claude created this. It said most of the time where my friction was coming because Claude did 67%, not percent, but 67 times wrong approach when it was not supposed to do that. So this is like real data from my journey and that Claude created. I did not ask specific that, But that's what I'm saying, that sometimes when we start and it's like, hey, we don't know the domain, Claude knows everything. Claude knows everything, but you have to ask questions. And that's what the topic of empathy is. It still is interaction tool. People are saying no, AI will take the job, but I would say no. Still, there are things like taste and these kinds of approaches, which for your personalized workflow, that Claude could help you guide there, but it might not always, or GitHub might not know all the things. So that's where you come into the place with like mid interruption thinking. You can search online on like mid interruption thinking, because thinking is not like a standalone AI goes in then come back stuff to think. Another, for I know we are 3 minutes almost there, but another one I've seen is people are talking about how many agents role you have created, because I have my entire Claude code system. After 4 months of non-stop working every day, I've realized what has helped me more is not multi-agent workflow, but basic skills. And it could be different for you guys. So as simple as naming a skill, like something I'm writing on a project, bug filing. I have all these advanced like things about sending email newsletters, everything. Those are also effective. But more, I have a dashboard where I track what skills and what agents I use. I've realized the data on my small skills has been more in terms of how impacting my productivity than big agents. Because those quick needs you can have, like to do note. That's another one that is I actively use on my mobile. It's like, hey, I've connected a to do, and it goes and stores, and then when I come to the computer, I can switch between. So I would say you not all your workflow has to start with agent, especially as you're shifting between tools. And the final tip is about, which has helped me the most, is reverse engineer your way. I don't know all the code bases, architectures, everything, but I use some of the things where I would take an screenshot of, even for example, I have to create na10, or Nathan people some people call it, which is a backend AI workflow tool. I don't know how to fill it. I just take a screenshot of any web app or anything you're doing. I'm like, Claude or GitHub Copilot, help me fill it. So, or like, what is this? Even that is another of my trend question in my report. It came. I was like, I asked too much Claude and GitHub Copilot. I take a screenshot, paste it in the terminal. It's like, what is it? Just explain. And somehow it figures out what tool it came from, what was the context. So even some of the my personal workflows that I've been using, it has been helping me a lot. There are also another mode I would say in Claude and GitHub around interviewing and planning. When I have very deep into like metrics and other things where you have to figure out success and other pieces, I just start the interview mode. It starts asking interactive questions. So another thing, if you guys have not seen recently, there's another trend around TUI, which is terminal user interfaces coming in, of how terminal can just are not just any longer typing surface. You can have buttons and other controls popping up too. So there you can have more enablement of your workflows there. But I know we are at time, so I want to quickly summarize of all the things mentioned. So these are the top 10 tricks that has helped me about thinking, courage, and empathy development with Claude Code and GitHub. Any questions, last minute thoughts? I have a blog in case whatever I skimmed through looked like too much and you want to go and read in detail. I have blog post on almost all of them, a separate one. I'll stop sharing if there is any final thought. Otherwise, I'll send you a recap email with the documentation and the links that I've shared in today's call. Cool. Thank you guys. Have a great day ahead then. Bye bye.
Thanks,
Thanks. Bye.
Rolly.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Raleigh.